second annual Nib and Ink Fest. Uh, there are captions available and questions will be taken at the end of the presentation. Welcome to the panel, Homestuck Beyond Canon Team Talks Shop and Collaborative Comic Making, or How to Run a Production. I'm Alexis Rippin. I've done actually a bit of logo work for the wonderful Furthest Ring Studios team, who I'm hosting here today. And how about y'all introduce yourselves?
All right. I'm Kim Quach, also known as Kim Quats on most all social media. I'm the director at Furthest Ring Studios for Homestuck Beyond Canon. I've been officially doing art for Homestuck since 2018, contributing character art, illustrations, storyboards, and animations across their games and comics. I have a BFA in entertainment art slash animation. I was a storyboard revisionist at HBO Max, and I've contributed as a character artist across other indie game studios as well.
Hey guys, my name is Miles. I am a director and writer on Homestuck Beyond Canon and for Furthest Ring Studios. A lot of my prior work experience is actually in administrative and project management and community advocacy. I've been really lucky to be able to use that experience for our project and our fandom.
Hello, everybody. I'm Annie Chumi Lee. I'm the production manager and also an artist at Furthest Ring Studios. So, my prior experience is I've been drawing and making merchandise, like running my own shop and tabling at conventions for nearly a decade prior to HSBC. I've also worked for games, creative projects, and conventions. And yeah,
What's up, everybody? I'm Haven. I'm a writer, artist, and animator for HSBC. Uh, I've done concept art, interiors, and narrative design for a couple games and comics in the past.
Hi guys, I'm Logan or Floral. I usually go by Floral. I am a writer, artist, and animator for HSBC also. I have been a comic artist for quite a while, and I have a BFA in animation. Um, One of my bigger projects was a Homestuck fan comic called Liminal Space that I did around like 2018. I've been working with Homestuck officially since 2023, but I've been part of the fandom since like 2011 to 2016.
Hey guys, I'm Andy, also known as Strovie or Andy Stuck. I'm an artist, animator, and music director at Furthest Ring Studios. For my prior experience, I do assets and illustrations for various games and webcomics. I have some personal creative projects where I publish my own webcomic, as well as composing music with other mediums. I've been working on Homestuck projects since 2019, and I hope to continue doing more.
Hey everybody, I'm Kohi, also Andrew, the other Andrew in the context of Homestuck. I am the programmer and sysadmin here at Furthest Ring. I have been working within the Homestuck IP since 2019, handling a variety of things such as working on animations, website development, visual novel development, etc. Before that, I have been working within the Homestuck fandom for a number of years. I am also a system administrator at my day job, have been for the past 3 years, and I use those skills as well as my work with my work here with Furthest Ring.
Yay! And that is Furthest Ring Studios. All right, so on to the panel. What is this workshop for? We're all here because we're creatives with the story you want to share with the world, whether it's something poignant or something silly.
Kim, I believe you've muted yourself.
Oh no, when did that happen? No!
About only about like 15 seconds ago.
Oh, well, let me just start from the top. What is this workshop for? We're all here because we're creatives with the story you want to share with the world. Whether it's something poignant or something silly, a video game, a comic, an animation, these projects are always quite the commitment and a huge undertaking, no matter if you're doing it solo or collaboratively. If you're not familiar with our work, our team essentially makes the sequel comic to the infamous multimedia webcomic Homestuck. If you don't know what Homestuck is about, don't worry, we know it's a lot. All you need to know is that it's a story about storytelling, about a group of friends who play a game that actually causes the end of the world and have to create a new universe to save it. The original author and creator of Homestuck, Andrew Hussey, has always expressed their intent with Homestuck was never about making something perfect, but to play in the space of imperfection, and to at the very least get the story they wanted to tell out there. And I commend Andrew for that. The hardest part of making a project is actually finishing it. Evolving from a one-man production to our team, taking up the mantle of making Homestuck's sequel, Beyond Canon, a story that once again continues the theme of asking, what makes a story? But also ask, what happens after the story ends when the heroes aren't ready to give up being the hero of the story just after it's already ended? A webcomic we've dedicated a lot of love and effort into because we believe in the story we want to tell and want to see it to the end as well. We were inspired to make this workshop because we want to relay our advice and experience making Beyond Canon to help all you aspiring creators reach that finish line. The question is, how do you get there? So, first things first, pitching. What is pitching? Pitching is essentially when you try to sell your idea, as in getting people invested in your project as well. Before you start your project, you need to have your idea fully conceptualized, have tangible proof that it is ready. You should be ready to start the project before bringing people on. The more confidently and evidently prepared you are, the easier it will be to get people on board. So, how do you do that? First things first, putting together your idea to pitch. Before you barrel forward with the idea that you want to make a reality, you want to ask yourself if you're picking the right one for the project. Say, for example, your longtime passion project that you probably had since you were 12 is your dearest baby. When you turn these ideas into production, you have to realize that sometimes compromises will have to be made. Either things get cut for time or changed around so that a wider audience can understand it. An idea that you might have held on to a very long time might end up getting changed, and you have to be prepared for that. Also realize once your idea becomes available to a wider audience, you're also giving this story and character to the people as well. A story is a conversation, and that means, and I say this as neutrally as possible, the audience will take and interpret it however they will. And again, you have to be prepared for that. If either of these points have made you a little wary of either of these prospects happening, it's okay to pick a different idea for production. When you keep your passion projects at least to yourself, you have all the control in the world to keep your vision intact. Though, this does tie into our next point. What is the scope of your project? What's your goal? Is it for a wider general audience? Is it for an extremely niche audience? Or is it just for you? If it's for a large studio and a wider audience, you're most likely going to have to create something in mind with a larger mainstream appeal that's easy for most people to understand. If the goal is a more niche appeal, you have to accept the fact it may not get as large of a reach, but you could stay closer to your creative vision, especially if you have a more counterculture or unorthodox storytelling ideas. For example, I would count Homestuck as having a very unorthodox storytelling structure. It doesn't quite follow a standard structure and was deliberately made to make the audience question what makes a story. That's the benefit of the original Homestuck comic originally being made as a one-man indie production. As a general advice, if this is your very first time running a production of any kind, it is usually recommended to start small. Think of it like exercise until you're finally ready to tackle that big dream project of yours. Projects will always bloat in scope. If it bloats when you start small, at least it will still be within a manageable range. Plus, you'll have the experience and come to learn your own limits. Each project becomes a learning experience so that you can understand how to tackle it better next time. And you don't want it to be too big that you can't handle it and you become so overwhelmed that you can't finish it. Though it's not to say you can't start big if your ideas always happen to seem so, but just be self-aware and ask yourself, are you ready to handle it? So, what do you do once you've picked the idea that you want to work with? So let's talk about that tangible proof that I mentioned earlier that you want to show people that you are ready. Pitch Bibles. So, what is a pitch Bible?
Pitch Bibles are essentially a reference document meant to be used as a guide for the directors that Inform about the general story arc, characters, setting, visual aesthetics, and other elements of television, film, or video game projects. And that's what Wikipedia says at least. Also, you use pitch Bibles to show other people that hopefully will give you money to make your project within the industry. What exactly the entire project is going to be about. If you're going indie though and trying with like a smaller group of people, like we are, it's more so going to be about showing the potential people that will be working with you, what the story is about, so they understand the full scope, and so they're caught up faster and quicker. And why are pitch Bibles important? As your production is coming along, sometimes it can exponentially grow in such a way you and your team can forget what the original intention of the project was for, like Kim was saying earlier. When you have a pitch Bible, you can easily look back and remind yourself, setting you back on track towards the goal. Similarly, like I said before, the pitch Bible shows tangible proof of commitment towards your project, that you're ready to make this a reality. Committing to a project takes a lot of people's time, resources, energy, so people want to be assured that this will be worthwhile, that you actually know where you're going with it and how this is going to end. I say this because it's easy to have cool ideas and be extremely tempted to preemptively jump headfirst into starting production. However, doing this before your ideas are even fully solidified can lead to like a really messy and struggling production process. You're stumbling trying to figure out important things midway through, when ideally you want to make things as easy as possible for everybody.
When you pitch your idea to people, and especially because when you pitch your idea to people, you want to give that assurance and show people that you have the confidence that you know what you're doing as well, right? And of
Mhm.
course, if you want people to like work with you, you want people to, when you're showing people your pitch model, it's like, oh, this guy knows what they're doing. They've planned out everything. Like, I want to work with him with them as well, you know? So, just to give you guys an example of a pitch Bible, since we can't show you ours, of course, because there'd be like a million spoilers in there, I want to show you guys pitch Bibles that have been successful and something that you're all familiar with. The Ed, Ed and Eddie pitch Bible. And also I just really like this as an example because I love how like succinct it is. Because like you could just see here in this pitch Bible and I'm sure once this workshop will be archived for later, you guys can all possibly like read this over later. Like all these descriptions for the show, it is literally just done in like a couple sentences. It's like an elevator pitch essentially when whoever the person is showing this pitch vibe with other people, just be like, here's what this show is about. Here's like it's like it tells you the vibe of it, what the characters are doing, like the type of humor that they're doing. It's like super straightforward. Another part of it, even just like the character the character pages that they they showed for it as well. Like, for example, for Eddie here, you could see how they're describing him is just like 3 words. Very easy to understand what kind of character this is. Whoever looks this over, they'll be like, I understand immediately what kind of guy this is, what's his deal is, how he looks. Even right here for the pitch Bible, you can even see they're describing the background characters that'll show up, the different locations. Everything has been accounted for. If you show someone your pitch Bible, it's like the person who's coming up to me with this, like they thought of everything. They thought of the characters. I already know what the show is gonna be like. I already know everything this place is gonna be. I can imagine this whole show in my head already. So when you're showing this either to like studio execs or like the people you're trying to work with, they'll have so much confidence to be like, this guy knows what they're doing, and this guy knows what they want. You know what I mean? And if I want to work with them, like I can see this to the end with them. I can make this a reality with them. So once you've taken into account everything and you finally got your idea ready, what else do you want to be prepared for? And that is management. This includes how you're going to approach the kind of relationship you want to have with your production crew, general organization, and making sure production is moving along. This is going to be the densest part of this workshop. One, because strong management is the key to any successful production. And two, because I imagine most of us creatives here already know how to make the parts of the project we want. But can you organize it? Organizing and management is probably the less fun side of running a production, so not many people have experience in it. But I want to emphasize that it is the essential spine of it, though. Before we get into it, I want you guys to be aware and know the difference in vibes and approach between when you're working for an indie production versus a large studio corporation.
Hey guys, Miles again. First, I'm going to walk you guys through the pros and cons of working for an indie production, because that's what we are. So the pros of indie production are fairly self-evident, but there's a few that might escape people. One of the main ones is that there is a more casual and friendly general environment, assuming you know the crew you've put together, because you can talk kind of however you want with your crew. You're not quite as constrained by the strict chains of professionalism. And more likely than not, it's also because you know these people from outside the project, so you're just more comfortable with each other. Deadlines on an indie project are also more lenient. You are not necessarily beholden to a studio executive saying something needs to come out on this exact date. You are able to set your own deadlines within reason. And also, your deadlines can be a little bit more maneuverable. They can pivot as opposed to at a larger studio where they may be a lot more strict. And finally, I mentioned this earlier, but in an indie production, oftentimes you get to work with friends or at the very least, people you have a specific interest in, because the only people picking the crew on the project is you. So this can create a very comfortable and fun environment to do a project in. And speaking as a guy currently making a project with a bunch of friends, I can tell you it is pretty awesome. It's really, really nice to have this kind of feeling about all the people you work with, and it leads to a lot of advantages for a production. But there are cons to being an indie studio. The first con is that things can actually be way too casual. It is really easy to accidentally get tripped up by lenient deadlines, by chatting with friends during work hours, things like this. And all of these things can make you forget when deadlines do, capital N need to be hit, which even for us, that's a thing. Our deadlines, we decide our deadlines, but we still need to hit them. We still want to get the comic out on a, appreciable pace. Um, the looseness of protocols in general in an indie production, various hangups possible with working with friends. This can lead to a lot of slippage in punctuality, quality, output, or general professionalism, which is important. Even on an indie production, like you do want to have an atmosphere of professionalism. It'll help. This all accumulates to basically have all these sort of negative effects on a project in all sorts of ways. And then, of course, the big one, the really obvious one, is lower pay. This is not always the case, but in general, most of us are not billionaires. We can't just fund these projects to our heart's content and hire as many people as we want. It's pretty limited to what you can acquire in terms of money. And lower pay can and will sometimes affect people's commitment to a project. Uh, these productions can be very intensive, and people can only dedicate so much of their day to a project when they need to make ends meet outside of the project. Um, Beyond Canon is actually pretty lucky to be relatively on the higher end of the indie income continuum, all things considered. But each of us is also putting at least 20 to 30 hours a week in on this project. And if you like did the calculations on what it is that how much we work versus how much we make, we're probably making like maybe minimum wage, or at least, California minimum wage, not federal. But yeah, it's a lot of work for not necessarily a professional financial, return.
Mm.
It's about the art.
And so, how does that compare to a large studio? The pros of the large studio, at the very least, is one, stricter organization, though maybe this is more of a neutral point, but it is a benefit to project runners because you can rely on people to turn things in on time to keep things moving. Deadlines are more strict, and when something is due, it is expected to be done. It's because the stakes are higher for corporate studios because failing to meet expectations can hurt someone's chances of being rehired. And some of you may know, it already is hard out there to get a gig at a large industry studio. And of course, another pro is higher pay, which means livable means for the crew. They can commit more time and commitment towards the project as a full-time job. Though the cons are, they're usually extremely fast-moving productions. Since they have stricter deadlines to meet, as we said earlier, it can be a lot more stressful and unforgiving. And another con is you have to keep it like only professional. And it's another possible neutral point in the sense it's like, since it's a possibility, most people in the field are just here to do their job and like go to do their job and just like, get it done, go home kind of thing like that. It can feel a bit distant. Plus, for remote jobs, you're most likely going to have to be using a work monitor chat program. So you have to keep it pretty professional. So it can be a bit hard to make friends and connections because there aren't as many opportunities for your coworkers to get to know you. So,
Assuming that you guys are actually all here interested in learning how to personally run an indie production like we are, that considered, how are you going to communicate with your team? And one of the first things to get into is the actual medium by which that communication is going to be happening. There are now two main methods that any projects get done. I guess you could always kind of say this is how work has been done, but especially in the post-COVID era, this is a huge consideration. Are you going to do an on-site production or a remote production? There's pros and cons to each. The pros of on-site are you get to have a separation between your home and your workspace. You have easy access to your coworkers. You can chat with them right there and then. There's quick communication and there is no mystery. Of course, the cons of that is you can really only work with people who are in your area. And another huge con is that any sort of office space that you're trying to get costs money. Unless, you're working at your house, but then that does sort of violate the separation between the home and workspace thing. With remote work, which I assume is going to be probably 95% of any project being done in this manner nowadays, but I really don't know. Remote work has pretty clear pros. You can hire anybody around the world. You have cheaper production costs because none of your money is going to any of the in-person physical considerations. You can have flexible hours because if if everybody doesn't need to be in the office at the exact same time, maybe somebody likes to work at night, maybe somebody likes to work on vacation. There's all these flexibilities in the ways that people can contribute to the project that are possible a lot more in a remote work setting. The cons of remote work are, like I said, it can be harder to communicate with your coworkers. There can be unreliable responsiveness, and I know, we all pretend like we're 100% attentive to our texts and our emails and our discords at all times, but that is a lie. That is a lie, and anybody who tells you that they are 100% responsive is a liar. That's just not true. And that's not always out of malice. It can just be, people get busy, people get distracted. Um, it is a lot easier to communicate with a person when you are in person. You can go tap them on the shoulder and be like, "Hey, I have a question for you." Uh, and you can't always do that online. So, whichever of these styles that you choose, though, either way, the same consideration needs to be at the forefront of your mind, which is developing a culture of reliable communication between your team members on every level, whether that be about writing, art, production, administrative concerns. That is one of the most essential keys to running a successful collaborative production. Having both the dedicated communication protocols and the comfort amongst team members to actually abide by those is a hugely indispensable asset. And although, again, I think this seems intuitive, but it's something I really want to emphasize because keeping people appraised, up to date, and comfortable with each other is like the most critical part of running a multi-person production.
All right, so check-ins and deadlines. So these are often the most important aspect of actually getting your story out and sometimes the least glamorous aspect of running a production, but you have to be on top of it. So checking in is extremely important to making sure that production is on course, and if not, figuring out what we can do to address that. Because if deadlines aren't met, then production will fall through. So when production manager or director nudges to check on the current progress of your assignment, it can feel daunting, but remembering that check-ins are for a reason, we need to know how production is coming along. And part of that is also pride and consideration of time. It's Like you gotta acknowledge your limits sometimes because there will be times where you just feel like you can't reasonably finish something on time. It's like you might be busy, there might be something coming up in your life, you might be really sick, and it can be hard to say that you can't do something or you can't meet like the deadline because it really might feel like giving up. It's like personally, it's like I really get it. It's like I'm sure like a lot of people also understand that feeling, but part of it is also being realistic so you can consider both your time and everyone else's time because crunching and pushing yourself when you're really not feeling up to it or if you're really sick, it makes things a lot harder for yourself. Your health can deteriorate while you work. And sometimes the fact is that you might not produce as great of a result compared to when you're working at your best. And that can also, I imagine, create just a lot of complicated feelings. And also, if you note to production as early as possible that, hey, I can't do it, like you sometimes you don't even have to give a reason, just noting to production as early as possible that like, hey, this can't be finished on time. They can also accommodate you or give the assignment to someone else to help things move along. And sometimes, a lot of times, the earlier you give a heads up, the earlier, like the easier it is for the pinch hitter to help you with your assignment. And also another consideration is how strict or lenient you want to be with deadlines. So part of the benefit of being an indie production is we're not very beholden to extremely strict deadlines. We have a lot of latitude, but does it matter to you if your project drops on the original intended release date? And if it is, it's very good to have a hard deadline. And also sometimes it's just good to have a deadline, just a goalpost in mind. And also remembering that strict deadlines means things get done. I guess at the end of it though, whatever you do not ghost, communicate, because if you start ghosting, especially during like deadline season or when things are coming up, it's like you are holding back the rest of production. And it can feel very intimidating to say, like, once again, that you want to, that you can't really do something, or you just feel like for whatever reason, it's not going to happen. But also keeping in mind that can become bottlenecked if it's stalling at you. Clear communication is key. Saying where your current progress is at and just keeping everyone on the same page is extremely important. All right, so organization, deciding when assignments will be due. So you want to give a reasonable amount of time for anything to be finished. And ideally, the people setting these deadlines should also have experience in the creative process. So it's like they have a realistic kind of outlook on how much time it takes to produce whatever it is you're producing. And in this case, we're talking about updates. We usually give around 4 weeks to produce quote unquote a update, whatever that may look like. So it's like we set that expectation because we personally, a lot of us or all of us have experience in making that updates themselves and drawing and production.
And sometimes that can vary per update as well, because sometimes there's more complicated things that happen in a certain update.
Pretty much.
But also, once you've prepared all the assignments to hand out, how will you allocate these assignments? My first step is asking team members what their preference is and try to work around that. If someone really wants to do a certain panel or update, I do my best to give it to them while keeping in mind their current workload. You also want to assign the right parts to the right person. Someone who's really good at drawing action sequences should handle the action scenes, or, someone who's really good at writing humor should write the comedic scenes. Stuff like that. And having your production documents and assets be easily accessible is also something really important in organization. You want it to be as easy and straightforward as possible, as if someone who has never seen your files before can immediately understand it. If it's hard to access or hard to find, it makes it harder for everyone else in the production. Things are constantly being updated, changed, handed off to others, so you need important files in organization to be easily understood at a glance. And one very easy way to do that is have a standard file naming convention. It helps streamline your work process as much as possible. For example, the file naming convention we use during the production of our biggest or our last big animation that we did was for Break in our comic Beyond Canon. It essentially was like, scene one, shot one, what kind of little thing it is, like a CG and Jade or whichever character, It's like super understandable. It's like, oh, I know exactly where this goes, what it is, and what it contains.
So going on from that, talking about the individual work files that you have, getting this sorted up into folders that are made accessible. You can do that through a couple of different platforms that are available. Very common one that's used, especially in indie context, is going to be Google Drive. Other alternatives are options like Microsoft 365 through their OneDrive or SharePoint services, ClickUp, Autodesk, ShotGrid, I believe is still the name of their offering. And Zoho is also another host option as well. If you don't want to go with a cloud managed platform, you can go with just a straight FTP or SFTP server for just direct file access. Basically, a networked hard drive that anybody can access if they have the proper capabilities of doing so. But that can be a little bit more of a involved process to set up, and also can cause some issues with the next point on this is being able to manage access to those files based on principle of least privilege. Making sure that the people who have access to your files are only the people who are supposed to have access to those files. There are some mechanisms like role-based access controls you can use here. But just as a general overview of that, make sure that when you are sharing files, you are constantly checking the sharing settings that only people who are supposed to have access to edit or read those files have access to it. And what kind of access they have. Only have read access, have the ability to overwrite things. Just making sure that anybody who's involved in the production process is able to do what they need to do, but no more, no less.
Mhm. Speaking of organization, here's our timeline. Well, at least an example of an older timeline that we had in 2023 when we were first starting our production of Beyond Canon. I would not gauge your production schedule from the time durations used here for whoever looking at the archive, trying to look closely at it. Um, Instead, I would look at what essentials are laid out on this calendar. This helps manage our expectations and know what our future will be like. Things may tweak here and there as it goes, but this at least gives the team and yourself the same assurance when everything should be moving. So it's like you can see like what holidays are going to be, how long something should take, and how when you can expect something to end. So it can be like, I know when this is going to be done, and this is when we should start moving along. And also work spreadsheets. This is our work schedule and our project's lifeline. I personally made and coded this myself and customized it specifically to our project. I am sure similarly there are other free blank work organizational spreadsheets out there to use that you may like and customize. As you can see, it's very straightforward. It takes into account every organizational aspect there is. I wanted it to serve essentially as like a one-stop easy access hub for our team to use. You can see here there's quick links for both the writers and the artist, color-coded deadlines that change as you approach the due date, progress bars for the team to check off when they're done, and quick overviews of each chapter. Everything is laid out so everyone can easily see at a glance what needs to be done. Now, this looks like a bunch of busy work, doesn't it? Don't you feel a little tired looking at all these spreadsheets and numbers? Which is why it's important to take breaks. So, remember to have weekends. I'm sure you're probably all excited to work on a production. You also have to remember to encourage your coworkers to take breaks. Even if you're all passionate, you'll burn yourself out if you don't give your brain a break. Pry your coworkers from their desk if you have to. It is for their health. When you work in an indie production, especially if it's remote and something that you're passionate about, it's sometimes really easy to forget where to draw the line to stop working. And trust me, the number of times I can count my coworkers, I've also been trying to like slap my hand away from work and be like, Kim, you're working too damn much. Please stop. And I'm like, but I like making this comic. But it's like, no, they make a great point though. It's like I needed to take like just a little bit of break from work just to like, refresh myself and everything. And once you feel refreshed, you'll feel so much better, stronger to come back working. And trust me, you'll be thankful for these reminders to give your brain a break. So, the next step though, onboarding. The part you guys are probably all looking forward to the most, recruiting all the cool people you want to work with for your project. So, how do you pick these people? For this slide, we're going to talk about all the important things you want to consider when you pick your crew members. You want to pick people that are, one, a good creative fit. You want to be sure their style fits the tone and overall look of your project and or if they're capable of adapting to it. For example, since Homestuck already has a pre-established identity that fans recognize, when we put together our crew for the sequel, we had to consider people who understand the material, well, both visually and as a story. Two, have group compatibility, that they mesh well and get along with the crew. Three, are reliable and competent, that they have a solid track record of being able to turn in their work on time and can be trusted to finish their job. And four, are open to collaboration. A production is a back and forth process, which means receiving notes and critique to work towards that vision. As someone struggles with hearing critique and is unable to compromise, maybe they aren't the best fit for a collaborative production. Though, with that considered, some of you out there may have considered your friends as your first option to recruit. However, consider when you hire your friends, it will change the nature of your relationship from being friends to coworkers. You may hang out great normally, but in a workplace environment, things kind of change drastically. So when you shift to being coworkers with someone, a lot more closely of people's priorities or what they can or can't handle. So consider carefully, okay? If you can trust them, hopefully y'all come out of this, stronger together. So, now that you got your whole crew and everyone has their job, what does the director do in all of this? It is the director's job to keep the vision cohesive to the initial idea and keep everyone on track.
Yes. So, as a director, you really have to be able to constructively communicate. And the first thing about that is you have to be able to give valuable feedback. If it's not working with the vision, you have to explain how that can be fixed as clearly as possible. As creatives, some of you may relate to the experience of working with directors who just give vague feedback. Don't be that guy. You want to be the director giving helpful and actionable advice.
And also, not being afraid to give that feedback. Some people get nervous that they're being mean for giving feedback, but you shouldn't be afraid to convey it because if your teammate is a good collaborator, you will know that everyone involved in your production is here to help work towards the same goal, to reach the best possible version of your vision.
You also want to know when to compromise. As a director, you are in charge of keeping things in line, but you also need to be flexible and hear out your creative teams if they propose good ideas, because it could be better than yours. Who knows? That's the point of having a team full of talented people and not just people who do whatever you say.
And also, knowing when to rein it in. It can be very tempting to go off at every part of the corner of the production, but you have to realize, especially as an indie production, as I keep emphasizing, our time and resources are very limited. So we have to allocate that time and energy towards the most appropriate places where they matter the most. Not every little shot has to be a crazy banger, as tempting it is sometimes. But sometimes a shot really is just like, a character standing there. Doesn't have to be a masterpiece. Save that energy for the money shots. So, now that the team's all here, it's time to get the ball rolling on your project. The next step being pre-production. So, what is pre-production? Pre-production is the behind the scenes that is solely for the production team to reference and make the next step of the production process easier. Before visuals can even start, we need to know what the ideas are, aka the writing.
So, writer here, let's talk about writing. Um, Sorry, one sec. Here we go. Okay, so writing, that is to say, the story itself, the outlines, the story beats, and then, of course, the scripts. When I say scripts, just for your information, what I mean is the final, uh, word by word, beat by beat outline of what that panel, what that page actually is going to look like. So, there are two basic ways that we write. We sort of dance between these two, but there's two methods to this that I want to talk about, and they're essentially collaborative versus individual. That is the writer's room, collaborative, versus script pitching, which tends to be individual. The pros of collaborative writing are pretty hard to overstate. You have a lot of eyes and minds on any given writing initiative, and I'd say this is really essential for long-term and full plot outlining, especially on longer-term projects where you need all your writers on the same page. And, side note, especially on a project as complicated and multifaceted as Homestuck. Uh, you cannot put that all on one person. One person keeping track of all that just isn't going to work. However, I will say that pitching scripts as individuals can really be a very good way to get chunks of the story done quickly. So, multiple writers working on different chunks, for example, provided that those beats, the outline has already been worked on, can result in more final script being produced in less time. So, in my experience, having, done Beyond Canon now for 3 years, or just about 3 years, coming on 3 years, I would say that the best way to run a collaborative production like this, depending on your production, is to dance between the two. You do your writer's room for your big beats and for a lot of the final drafting. You can maybe get individual scripts done when you know you want somebody to just bang out a scene as fast as possible. And regular check-ins between the whole writing team are pretty essential, again, just to keep everybody on the same page. Another thing I want to talk about briefly is knowing when to move on, whether that be from an idea or a story beat or just in general. This can be tough to do during production, especially during the production of a plot that you've been working on for a long time, because maybe you've spent years attaching yourself to an idea in your head and even working that into the outline. And it can be really, really hard to relinquish when suddenly your story has taken a turn or, even just a flavor shift that makes that particular idea no longer work with the production. That has happened to us. Um, it is actually not only possible, it is probably likely that this kind of thing is going to happen to you kind of a lot. Um, and another thing I want to mention is that depending on your schedule, again, indie versus, studio, mostly indie, you do want to be cognizant of hopping between doing long-term outlining for the whole project versus focusing on grinding out final scripts for impending releases. Because it is obviously great and advantageous to have as much of the project outlined in advance as you can. But in practice, allowing yourself time to go back and just finish scripts not only ensures that you have material ready for release, and side note, releasing is extremely motivating. Um, Honestly, more motivating than the money is getting to see the reaction to the work actually coming out. But also, when you do this, you might spark ideas that change the direction your story was originally intended to go. All of this sort of takes us to the next part of the conceptualization stage, which is the concept art. Um, Writers, what we do is we pass down our scripts and our ideas, our concepts for a scene or for a character, and it is the artist's job to help bring that vision to life. I'd say this is a part of the process that probably benefits the most from having a well-established culture of inter-team communication, and also suffers a lot if that culture isn't up to snuff.
Hmm. So, the concept art. Concept art includes the character designs, explorations and turnarounds, environment designs, prop designs, and visual development, the whole shebang, trying to establish the overall visual look and style to your project. And how exactly do artists even begin to brainstorm all their ideas during this stage? There's no one way to approach it, but I've always found it useful when, as soon as I am handed a script or a concept, I immediately put down the first few visual ideas that come to mind. After that, any and all variants I can possibly think of. Variants meaning different kinds of clothing, approaches, color schemes, etc. It's good to make these variants because your first draft may not even always be the best one. Give yourself some time to cook on it. When you do these different explorations, you may discover an interesting route that others haven't considered before that conveys the concept the best.
All right. Sorry, one second. One thing I do want to chime in here and say is that luckily, because of the small nature of our team and the high level of intercommunication comfort we have, our writing team, and also just the fact that we have two incredible artists on the writing team, our writing team has a pretty strong artistic vision that we also try to make apparent to the artists so that they can be informed while they, really bring it to life. Because going back to what was said earlier, Um, our production has full team meetings at least once a week, and often at those meetings, the focus is art. We have what we call lab hours, where it's essentially just production. But where concept art, where the concept art to final product pipeline is concerned, what this does is it allows us to be sure that the whole team feels good about a particular design or concept or even panel before really finalizing it. And when you get everyone's eyes on the art, it not only ensures that the art matches, our vision as writers, but it also gets every artist's eyes on it, and it leads to that diversity of input leads to almost always an increase in the quality of the final deliverable. So just wanted to chime in and say that.
Mm-hmm. And here are some examples of our own concept art for a couple character designs we made for Beyond Canon. As some of you may have seen in our recently publicized Patreon commentary that just got released for Jade Talk. As you could see, there's many iterations, styles, and even tiny tweaks we attempt until we finally reach a stage we're all happy with. Similarly, here is some concept art for one of our comics locations. From the rough sketches, the general idea, the different variants, etc. You want the concept art to capture the attention you're telling with your story, to be a clear reference for the artist, and, of course, to make sure everything looks good visually and cohesively. And once all the story beats are written, locked in, all the key visuals are designed, we move on to the storyboards. Storyboards are a sequence of drawings used to plan a visual narrative, essentially the camera of your production. And there are usually 3 stages to storyboarding.
That's the first stage is where I come in. That will be thumbnailing. And essentially, these are extremely left planning drawings. And how it works with FRS, this usually doesn't work in probably other productions, is that as we are writing the script, um, me or Haven sometimes will be sketching out things because especially with comic work, it's really important to understand the flow of the images so that they correlate correctly with the flow of what's being written because comics those two things have to work hand in hand together. They're not separate pieces. They are two parts of the whole narrative. So my biggest thing when doing the thumbnails is understanding the flow of the pages, how everything looks sequentially. It's also there to get every idea down and make sure that the idea works. You know, it's really, really important to be rough with these. You want to mostly get like the composition ideas down along with like the most major details because the whole point is if something doesn't work, you need to feel free to switch it up and scrap whatever you had. So the rougher they are, the less time sink you have to them and the better ability you have of like really problem solving and just it's always good to be able to throw something out that doesn't work. That's another reason why I really love doing it during the writing process. But it really isn't like at a loss because you drew so simply that everything is easy to change.
Mm-hmm. And essentially, once you get your rough boards approved, next step is the polish pass. You'll go over your boards once more to draw them on model and secure down the composition. Everything will be locked in. No longer are they just rough stickman drawings. And when you make your drawings, and when you make the sorry. And when you're doing your polish pass, make sure your drawings are strong and clear, especially in a large studio production. As things get passed around, as things get passed around through the many hands in production, things may inevitably get lost in translation along the way. If you're doing an animation, as we sometimes do in our webcomic, this is when you'd also be timing your boards slash making the animatic. This involves a little bit more video editing, but essentially it's defining how long a shot will last for, what kind of camera movements there will be, etc. For Beyond Canon, we usually forgo this for the most part unless we're doing animated sound pages. Animated sound pages are essentially what makes Homestuck as a webcomic so particularly unique, where it utilizes every benefit and aspect of itself as a webcomic. and are often reserved for especially memorable story beats. So, here's some example of thumbnails I wanted to show you guys. You could see how more or less polished some of the board artists choose to approach it. Some like a little more, you see it looks almost exactly how the panel showed up is. Others just being like so rough, but you get the general idea down that at least when you convey it to the artist, it's like, okay, I understand who this is or what this is and what's going on in this scene. And when we polish it, this is what it'll get all tied down. Just another example of how the difference between going from the rough thumbnails versus the final polish pass. I made these for one of the older updates. Uh, it's still generally a bit like rough, but you can still see how the compositions are locked down. And once it goes to like the polish pass, it's like everything is secure. I know exactly where everything is, and how it showed up in the polish pass looks exactly how the panel did. Next step, style guides. What are style guides and what do they do? Style guides serve as the rule book for what makes the visual style of your production. Most productions are pretty strict with their visual style because it's what makes them distinct from other projects. It also depends if the production is more script-driven versus board-driven. Script-driven meaning it's more strict to what the director/writer wants, and there are little to no leeways on personal style/influences from the artist. Board driven means that the board artists have a lot more creative liberty going quote unquote off model, either for the sake of comedy or utilizing the art style to push the conveyed mood on certain moments. I would definitely classify Homestuck very similarly to a board driven production. And I want to show you guys an example of style guides that I really like. So, My Life as a Teenage Robot. And for My Life as a Teenage Robot, as some of you guys recognize, this show probably has like such a unique and defined style that we all like recognize it as. And if you see in these style guides, there's a lot of interesting do's and don'ts listed that make the style for what it is, what makes it look appealing, advice to avoid, what would look unusual for its production, or what to do for special unique poses, etc. I would really recommend checking these out for the rest of the style guide for this production because I think they're very cohesive and easy to learn from. Also, I'm not gonna lie, I also learned a lot just from looking at these style guides as well. Like they influenced my style as well. Just another example I wanted to show you that I also really like as a style guide I've seen around. Here are a couple more examples to show you these style guides can vary across productions. This one here is from the show The Ghost and Molly Gee. They tell you how to construct the character, how to move her, similarly to My Life as a Teenage Robot, general advice to the artist that helps retain what makes the show look cohesive. And how is it different on Homestuck? Homestuck has a vast range of art styles. It's almost difficult to singularly define what is the one style. Of course, there's a general distinct feel to Homestuck art as it all comes from Andrew Hussey. More than the art itself, as you can see here, here are some observations of different kinds of camera styles Homestuck has, whether they be more actiony, more simplified, or uniquely to Homestuck, like a video game. It's also important to note that Homestuck by nature is a constantly evolving production, and that also includes the art. Our goal is to reflect that too within our sequel comic Beyond Canon. We've already done a few experimental styles within Beyond Canon and how that can vary from artist to artist. Here on this slide, you can even see how the different artists might have a different distinct visual style to themselves in their panels. If you've read our comic, were you able to guess which artist did what? But now that the pre-production is all done and squared out, it's time to move on to the production process. What is the production process? When you are making the creative final product that you're putting out for everyone to see on screen, or for you folks, on the page. This section will probably be the shortest since I'm assuming most of you here attending are already creatives, and it's simply the point of just making it. So, art production. At this stage, as I said, you are now making the final polished product that will be on screen. With everything readily made during the pre-production section, having laid down all the groundwork, the actual production itself should be as smooth as possible. There are many ways the actual production can vary depending on the type of medium/product you're making, so I'm going to assume we're all focusing on comic production. Since in pre-production, all the designs, colors, compositions, layouts, etc. should have been ideally locked in and laid out, the artist's job during this stage is to simply polish it up, put it all together, and make it look nice. Ideally, there's no room for confusion and ambiguity, so it should all be a breeze and there's no confusion to what the final product ends up looking like. Sometimes minor things from pre-production can get tweaked during this process, hence why it's advised during pre-production to make your intention as clear as possible so that whoever gets this handed off to can clearly understand the desired end product, as things may get lost in translation between the exchange of hands down the production. My biggest advice: don't hold things precious. I know there's a lot of pressure to want to make it as beautiful and perfect for the final product as possible, but you can't always afford the time to be a perfectionist because, in the end, a finished and turned in assignment is better than a missing one, especially when you are in a moving production that have strict deadlines to hit. So, once all the art gets turned in and you've got the visuals, now here's the part that really makes our comic special. How about some sound?
Hey guys, it's Andy. So I do art on HSBC, but I also touch a little bit on music as well. So music is really the lifter for the final product, and I think it is vital to execute it with polish and care. I focus on what's important for the viewer to feel. How can I get them to tune into the pathos intended for each section of the composition? How can I establish momentum according to the action happening on screen? Matching the artist's vision as well as maintaining interest throughout the subject of the animation is the primary goal to fully achieve visual harmony. Traditionally, Homestuck works differently than the standard music to animation pipeline, in that animations were typically timed to music and not the other way around. This was because fan contributors in the past would make music with an already imagined image or whatever was meant to be expressed, and the author would feature their work in the animations. For our project, however, something I began to integrate as a music director is creating visuals and scoring sound concurrently. We have narratively structured key visuals that require a lot more of an isolated focus to properly execute a well-timed audio and a properly choreographed storyboard. I'd work closely with the musician and show them the draft boards to give them an idea of what we're looking for. Scoring animation requires attention to beats, and it's important that those beats are being hit punctually and contextually into the next section. I'm pretty freeform about music. I listen to a lot of jazz, and I think it's great to be open to informalities. When it comes to Homestuck, its music always covered a wide range of genres, from orchestral to chiptune to simple piano. So in a way, it was always informal, and I believe this medium is so welcoming to experimentation for that fact alone. Along with musicality, the technicalities are also something I focus on, maybe even more so than the composition. How the music plays to the ears affects the intake of what energy is intended to radiate to the viewer. We don't like muddy sound. Muddy sound will absolutely kill the visual intensity of the animation. If your audio sounds flat and overly compressed, the images will feel flat and underwhelming as well. The musician's mixing will always dictate how hard the punches and kicks will feel in the animation, so that's something I focus on way more. I also sometimes ask musicians to add or remove instruments. Instruments can also be a foundation for particular feelings. Homestuck features a lot of electric guitar, for example. It'd feel off if the heavy distortion of the guitar was used in a particularly solemn and slow scene, so we save that instrument for high-intensity scenes. Again, for an indie production like Homestuck, I believe its music has always been known for its alumni of amazing creators, and I want to keep that going. New talent is always bringing a new sound, and that is how music evolves. Allow your production to evolve and try new things. Beta listeners are there to understand what sound feels like the project and what doesn't. So definitely take as much input as you can for its signature sound in whatever story or idea concept you're establishing.
Now that we've got all the parts ready, what happens next? Post-production. What counts as post-production? the final touches. It's usually things like compositing or essentially putting all the things together to present to the public. For example, video editing, audio mixing and mastering, website implementation, etc. One thing about our comic that sets us apart from others is that we have animated segments using Adobe Animate. But how and why do we make those animated segments?
And we do that with compositing. Yay! So I'm an artist and a writer. I am also kind of the head compositor. Um, and essentially, we specifically, as a comic, are utilizing multimedia. And we do this for a lot of reasons, partially because the original Homestuck did, but also because it's a really great tool to kind of sometimes surprise your readers and also emphasize the deeply funny and dramatic moments in your comic. Because usually how it works is, you know, our comic is heavy words, um, heavy visuals sometimes, but there are just some things that, especially with a single panel format, um, when it comes to action, it's almost easier to simply animate to get that full effect because the type of animation that we do is through Adobe Animate. So it's going to be more along the lines of tweening. And in a way, because we're using assets instead of like individual drawings, um, it allows us to reach emotional high points with less drawing. And that means a little bit less labor. Yay!
Yay, I love doing less labor. So, now once we've made and put together all the pieces of our beautiful comic, how do we get it out there to the people? Where do you put it? How should you present it? Kohi, our web developer extraordinaire, will take it away from here.
Thank you, Kim. So you've gone through all this hard work of the pre-production and the production steps in your pipeline. Now, biggest question, how the hell do you get what you've made to your audience? Depending on the type of project that you're working on, it might make sense to use a dedicated platform. For example, if you're making an animation, it might make sense to publish it on something like YouTube. But for this circumstance, since we are making a web comic, we are using a website. You have some options in the area. You can also go with a platform. There are some available such as WordPress.org or Squarespace or NeoCities. But we're doing things from an indie standpoint, so I'm going to talk about some of the options for making your own website. Uh, Generally speaking, there are two different types of website that you can use. And these are not mutually exclusive by any means. A lot of these options here actually have benefits of the other. But the two types of websites are going to be static versus dynamic. Static sites, they are typically cheaper or some cases can be free to host because they are just straight flat files. They are flat HTML files. They are less complex. You aren't really dealing with anything like a database, so you don't have to worry about, pulling data from that. And they can be more flexible based on your skill set. Um, some of the downsides to that is that it does require a skill set to be able to do things with a static website. You have to know how to write your web pages, for example. And another downside is that when you're using a static site, you do typically have to rebuild your website whenever you add new pages. On the other side, dynamic sites, typically those are handled through something called a content management system or a CMS, which acts as a almost like an admin panel for any of the contributors who are making the pages to be published. Big benefits of using a CMS is that you're able to create those pages with little to no technical experience. It really abstracts away some of the complexities of creating your web pages from scratch. Useful with some of the features that are typically available in CMS frameworks. WYSIWYG editors, or what you see is what you get. Those are the ability to create formatted text without having to without having to have the knowledge of something like bold tags in HTML. You just select it, you click bold, and the text is bold. Um, some CMSs also have other features as well, such as managing user accounts, managing theming and other styles for your web pages. Sky's the limit, or I guess in this case, the CMS of your choice is the limit. Uh, some of the downsides are that they are typically more complex and they have more resources in their stack. They do typically have a database connection, and with more parts does come increased cost. Typically, it is going to cost some money to host a database unless you're doing it yourself on your home network. And some of the other downsides are you can be a little restricted to what your CMS framework has for building those pages. CMS platforms typically operate on a building block structure, so you can be restricted by those building blocks. Some examples of static site generators or SSGs are going to be Gatsby or Astro, and Jekyll is also another big one. And for dynamic or CMS-driven websites, WordPress might be a big name that many are familiar with, is an example. Drupal and Payload CMS, and in our circumstances, we are using Strapi for our CMS. So now that you have an idea of ways that you can start getting the final production out to your audience, we can get to these post-production steps of drafting and then publishing the content. So in our typical workflow, we have a handful of assets, all of our individual panels, and we get those uploaded into our CMS. Our CMS has a dedicated media manager component, so it handles any kind of file uploads. And then we start getting all of the text into each of those pages. In Homestuck in particular, there is a very infamously known concept of text quirks. So there is a lot of formatting that goes into that, making sure that character dialogue is colored and text are placed accurately. And if you do any programming and are familiar with regular expressions, those can be extremely handy for formatting text. But once we have all the pages drafted up and everything, then having a preview available for the development team is extremely handy. This is the way to kind of get a actual look at what the published pages will look like for the audience. It is a version that is on a preview link on the website, so it is as close as you can get to having a sneak peek at the published content. Take that time to kind of give it a final sanity check, review, make sure there weren't any typos or anything that were missed, make sure that all of the art assets are using the final versions, that there aren't any inaccuracies. Basically, this is just the final check prior to publishing. And once that the check is complete, we have a consensus on everything looking good. Then we have our scheduled time of when we decide to publish that update. And we hit that big old button, and everybody loses their minds as the pages are published.
Then, congratulations! We did it! You did it! You made it to the finish line! You got your product out to the public! So, what happens next? As you can probably expect, there will be audience feedback. There will probably be people excited, intrigued, all the fun stuff you were looking forward to when it comes to sharing your story. However, it won't always be sunshine and rainbows. The reality is, you can't impress everyone. Receiving criticism is the nature of being a creative and sharing your story to the public. Some more or less helpful. Some good things to ask yourself when you receive criticism are, is the criticism valid? Does accepting the criticism mean changing your vision? And are you okay with that? It's like I was talking about earlier when considering your audience and the scope of your project. To reiterate, once your idea becomes available to a wider audience, you're also giving the story and characters to the people as well. A story is a conversation, and that means, and I say this as neutrally as possible, the audience will take and interpret however they will. And again, you have to be prepared for that. How do you react to criticism? It may be tempting to want to correct something someone may have misunderstood about your story or defend yourself, but once again, the audience's interpretation is the nature and the beauty of storytelling. Plus, once the story is out of your hands, you can't always expect to be over someone's shoulder correcting them. You want the story to speak for itself. It's often best to leave it be. Remember, the variety of discussion is also healthy. I know critique on your own art can sometimes feel like a personal attack because we all feel deeply connected to the things we make, of course. But as storytellers, you have to respect the audience is also part of the art because you've already involved them by sharing it to the people. If the reaction wasn't the intended goal, perhaps it is something to be reevaluated and or workshopped in the next installment. Reflect with your crew whether it's something that needs to be done that something needs to be done or not. This is where it's also good to have a strong team rapport who are honest and care for each other and the project. And how do you not let that criticism affect your morale? Sometimes it feels like negative criticism can be the loudest, but remember the support that you do have, whether it's from your fans or your crew who trust the story you're trying to tell. It's easy to get completely enveloped into your project that you practically dedicate your whole life to it, and everything connected to it feels all the more personal. But remember that it's healthy to take a break from your work, not just the physical work, but also mentally. Hang out with your friends, your loved ones, go to the aquarium or something, whatever. When you remember not everything is about work, it's easier to balance what is actually important to hear or not. The back and forth between creator and audience is the reason why I love storytelling. It's a fascinating study of how our individual lives shape the stories we want to tell, and how each and every audience member experiences a story because we all live so uniquely and take away different interpretations from it. Speaking of feedback, though, it's time for the Q&A.
Yay.
Yay!
I'm ready to chat. Let's answer some questions.
What
Hello, guys.
questions you guys got? I know that was a lot.
We do have a question in chat already. They had to leave, but we can answer that first and they can check out the VOD.
hmm
So the question was, I was wondering how the transition from HS2 to HSBC was production-wise for you guys.
I'd say the production for HS2, it was a lot more shorter turnarounds, if anything. And um, if anything, I feel like it was more writer oriented. If anything, I think the artist had a little less input on it than usual. I'd say compared with our production, we have the team is more involved together in the story. Of course, obviously the writers spearhead a majority of the writing, but it's like now the artist can be like, oh, I think this, can benefit the story a little bit if we like push in this direction, or think, or we could even be like, oh, I can imagine for this scene, like visually, like I don't know, this lighting would look really nice here, blah blah blah, kind of thing like that, and like we can accommodate each other. It's like a back and forth between the writers and the artist this time.
Yeah, I think that the production was a little bit more discreet during the HS2 era. There was more writers focus, and then any of the artwork that was done was in its own encapsulated section, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you have people who are specifically doing the writing versus specifically doing the art and illustration, being able to have a discrete pipeline going from one step to the other can be beneficial. And then in our pipelines for HSBC, just because there are a lot more multi-hat wearing individuals on the team who are doing both art and writing. It just kind of naturally meshes together that we're doing multiple steps at the same time.
Especially for like big studio productions, writing is usually like happened way back kind of thing like that. When it comes down to like the storyboard artists and the animators, like they're so far down the line, it's Artists don't really get a chance to touch upon that.
So, another question from earlier. How do you choose when to compose music in-house, like with the librarian, or through a third party, like with Lilac Look and Jade Talk?
Can you repeat the first part?
Oh, sorry. How do you choose when to compose music in-house, like with the librarian, or through a third party, like with Lilac Look and Jade Talk?
Um,
Yeah, so or you go
Sorry,
ahead,
go for it.
Miles.
Okay, yeah. Basically, it's kind of case by case. For something like, for something like Break, or like, for example, our upcoming Flash, things like that. Um, we, I can speak for myself, having done a song for the comic. I'm pretty new, like very new to music production, and for large things like that, we also do like to get people from the community involved, I guess, in our work because it increases a sense of like fan ownership. It sort of ups the creative and musical diversity of the project. We are hoping to
Mm-hmm.
get like a big musical catalog at some point, if we can work our way up to that. And the thing is for the Librarian Flash, for example, I'll just say that being a little interactable Flash was sort of a spur of the moment decision. We needed a short turnaround. We didn't want to, pay for anything, and I just was like, let me use this as an opportunity to get a little bit better at music production and see if I have what it takes. Um,
Came out really
Andy,
good too.
thank you. I thought it was okay. But Andy, you
Um,
had more to say?
yeah, so as far as like it's like Miles said, it was a spur of the moment thing, but it was a really simple flash, so we felt it was okay to experiment there a little bit. And I do hope to put my music in as well. Um, I'm really excited for that in the future that we can do more in-house stuff. But as far as like reaching out to others, that is definitely planned with the schedule. We do try to have check-ins with them to look over how it sounds. Um, it is mostly a concurrent thing where whatever we're planning, we want to make sure that we're hitting the right beats, we're hitting the right notes. So with specifically for Jade Talk, uh, I did have a lot of notes over time, especially for some of the slideshow aspects of it. Like we wanted to make sure that especially around the end, there was that big wind down. I wanted to make sure that was in. So I do talk really closely with musicians during that time, and that is like a very organized approach as compared to in-house. In-house, we kind of just want to experiment, but we do want to get musicians that can actually deliver and are open to changing and are open to um, restructuring their composition.
All right. Next, how do you find people to work with you if you've never done any project like this before? From Johnny.
That is a good question. I'm assuming like if you're on social media and you seen like artists that you've liked before, like and also assuming if you're the one spearheading the project, you have like a visual idea in your mind already of like I want it to have like this kind of art style, this kind of vibe kind of thing. And if you keep up with the creatives around you, you probably think like, "Oh, I'd really love to work with this person," you know? And of course, assuming if you're like an indie production, that's when at the moment you'd like reach out, DM, email, and be like, hey, I have this pitch. I'm working on this project. Would you like to work with me? You know, it can be a little wary if you're just, plucking up a random creative on like social media, but also I think it's good to have it's good to be involved in the community as well, just so you are somewhat familiar with the people. I know that's a little vague, but at least in the sense where I'm trying to get at is that like, I don't know, if you were involved in community, you might hear enough. It's like, oh, this person's like really great to work with. It's like, They've worked with me before on like another project kind of thing. They got things done kind of stuff. It's like that sounds great. Like one, the style fits what I wanted. Also, it's like I heard they work great and stuff like that. It's sometimes it can be a little word of mouth, and sometimes it is a little bit of mix of like you got to take a little stab in the dark of like who you think will work best with you, you know? Why do you think for hiring processes for your studios is always like they want to know who you are. Right.
Background checks are also important.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah, just generally having an idea of your talent pool is really beneficial because better you have an idea of who is available and what they can do, the better of an idea you'll have on how well they'll work with the team.
All right. I'm gonna jump around a little bit in the questions because I know Logan has to go a little bit sooner than everyone else. So, uh, one question that Rosie would like to ask is, where did you guys learn how to make comics, writing, art, production? Do you have suggestions on where to start on learning how to make them?
I just
Uh,
like cracked my hand like like a master like but you can go first.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I went to college for entertainment art slash animation, so it's like mostly my expertise is in storyboarding, but essentially, you know, it's a sequential art. A lot of the rules apply the same, but comic making really is a whole other field on its own from storyboarding because, you know, paneling really is it's this whole kind of art. But, you know, a little luckily for Homestuck, the way that it's boarded out is almost very similar to storyboarding, to be honest.
Yeah. And even if you didn't go to school or anything or art schools, definitely take notes from people who do so
Mhm.
that you can get an idea of like the standard pipeline of storyboarding. Because when I started, I didn't know anything about storyboarding, but I did follow people who were, because I didn't go to art school. But it is important to follow like the rules that were already established for that kind of thing with sequential art.
And what's really nice is that a lot of people they're putting their advice out there or like things that they've learned just for free on the internet.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so many resources.
I will say too, I also went to school for animation. So I didn't learn anything about comics with animation. Um, the biggest thing like with comics is finding communities so that you can do smaller projects. I know that there's like things called OCTs, stuff like that, where that's like an original character tournament. It's just finding any way for you to make at least like one page of comics, one thing that's gonna push the understanding of comics. There's this like also this one series, it's a docu-series, um, done by Urasawa, who is a mangaka from a lot of like Monster, which we actually reference in H HSBC, um, along with Pluto, a bunch of really big names. And he has a docu-series called, oh my God, I shouldn't have mentioned it unless I could remember it.
Urasawa
Uh,
Manben.
Thank you.
Mm.
So Manben goes through a lot of different mangakas, philosophies and processes, and finding things like that for free and just constantly taking in as much information as possible. I think that is the most important thing to do. Check universities because sometimes universities will also post like their syllabuses for their classes, and you can at least see what exercises they are doing, and then you could try to find information that correlates with those. So you don't have to pay for the course, but you can learn. Um, I know, I think it's Minneapolis College of Design. They have a comic course. I think they actually post like different exercises for comics. Because the thing is like one thing to remember with between storyboarding and comicking is that you your camera work is going to be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Also understanding comics by Scott McCloud is
Yeah,
essential.
I wanted to
Yeah,
recommend that. That helped me so much. That was like a really good read. It was really insightful.
that exactly. That is essential. And books too. Will Eisner is like a great early comic maker. In general, there are avenues to learn, and there is a science to comics that I feel really passionately about. And I'm just so excited that people are interested in learning.
Oh, I also want to bring up, just to put it out there, if people are looking for resources, and this is particularly if people have the money to expend in it. But what's also really nice, you don't like some people are saying you don't have to go to college to learn these things as well. But there are classes available online, like for example, like
Hmm.
Brainstorm and Schoolism, where like it's definitely way cheaper than going to college, and like depending on the courses you could take, it's only like some can only be like $100, $200, sometimes a little more. But like they're available online, you know? It's like it's so nice that all of these like accessibility to learn these things. Like you could just
Mm-hmm.
get it.
Yeah. I'm also going to take this moment to kind of plug our hosts a little bit. The Cartoonist Cooperative. There is a massive resource repository available on that website as well, for so much of the comic development process, everything from covering most of the topics we actually talked about today.
Yeah, there are so many resources online in general and also in the Cartoonists United resource library. Um, Another question that I'm gonna pick out is um, how is a consideration for scope of ideas? Such as when someone pitches this is really cool scene where all these explosions happen. How's the process of deciding how many exciting high scope stuff happens, which to cut, which to replace with lower scope alternatives, etc. The process of not overscoping, basically.
I
Hmm.
Oh, scope creep my
that
beloved.
yeah, I think that what's what's kind of grim about that is that like being able to instinctively answer that question on a case by case basis is something that you as a production understand more with time. Um,
It
it's
can be
best,
really subjective.
yeah, it really no, it can. And it's best, I think, to build up scope. Like when we started the comic again back in 23. Oh my God, I can't believe it. But when we started again, we really built our way up. So we started with just normal panels and pester logs and a little bit of narration here and there. We really wanted to keep it manageable. I think that the first ambitious thing that we did was Hell Tier, if I remember correctly. Or I
Like
mean, when I say
like
ambitious,
break?
I mean no, Helter, the
Oh.
visual novel.
Oh, yes, the
Yeah.
visual novel.
That
So
was,
For
yeah, something
me,
yeah,
completely new. Yeah, that was
that
really,
was
really
it was
ambitious.
I feel
yeah,
like
and sorry, go ahead, Haven.
I was gonna say, I feel like the first one I remember that felt like dipping our toes in that was the large house panel.
Yeah.
Ooh, yes, getting a little experimental with
That
it.
one,
Mm.
that panel
Hmm.
that took like 3 weeks to draw,
Yeah.
and then
And it came out great.
and
It
then
did come out great.
asking Kohi if it was even possible to put it out
Can
right.
we
Like
break our
midway
website,
through doing
Kohi?
it.
And then as it was being uploaded, Kohi like fixing it so it actually fit.
Yeah.
I
But
love being able to say yes to things. It's my
Yeah.
favorite thing.
yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at is essentially like the further you go with a team and understand your own and other people's capabilities and the capability of your medium, the better you are at answering that question. But until then, I think it really behooves any production to start slow, or not slow per se, but start with
Small.
what you know you can do
Yeah.
and take little baby dips into the deep end, deeper and deeper and deeper as you go, as your team gets more comfortable. And you will work out what it is that's feasible to do. And
Hmm.
because now I do think it's a lot at this stage in our production, we know each other better. We know our capabilities better and what our project is and what it needs. So there are times when we suggest stuff and it's just like, yeah, that'll be cool, but let's partition this out a little bit more, you know, conservatively, shall we say.
I have some my personal advice as well when it comes to trying to prevent bloat is that what I've always noticed is that like a lot of bloating actually happens during like the pre-production process. Say like we're storyboarding, right? And it's like it's because you want to get all these cool ideas down. It's like, oh, I want this like cool move to happen. I want this like really nice shot to get in there and stuff like that. But then like when we finally get around to tying down those like storyboards, we of course we're like reviewing it with like other storyboard artists and whatnot. And then we're like realizing it's like either it's like this is either getting really long or it's like they're looking at it, it's like this just seems excessive. Like why is this here kind of thing like that. It's like and I'm sitting here thinking it's like you know what, you're right. This is getting too long. Because if anything, when you look back at it, because like the more you keep adding on it, you also have to think to yourself, it's like this is also more work that you have to do later. You know what I mean? Like it's cool to put the idea down, but remember it's like you have to keep this moving and also you're piling things on that you need to do, you know? And also personally, I'm when it comes to story writing, I actually like when things are a little more like succinct. Like if you can trim it down as like much as possible, if you can get your story across like as like concisely as possible. I think that's like amazing storytelling, you know? That it's like that you don't need to be so wordy with it or whatnot. It's like if you can get the ideas like so straightforward, so brilliantly, I'm like, that's the ticket right there. Like that's why I always really like to believe it's like I try to minimize the bloat as much as possible.
Great. Thank you so much. Another question, this one from Silent Spy. How do you handle instrumentation when you can't use the instrument in question, like using a guitar for a song when you can't play?
So that one is interesting because there's actually a lot of musicians that don't know how to play guitar, yet they use a lot of guitar sound fonts. And I do think it's possible to be able to replicate the the style of an instrument within the DAW because
Yeah.
um Miles, you did the saxophone part for that
Yeah.
and it
No, I
sounded
did.
like a
And
saxophone.
I have not, I don't even think I've touched a saxophone in my entire life.
Yeah.
Like
So
physically touched one. So,
so it's totally doable. You just need to like you can always play it by ear. You can always reference a real, for example, a real saxophone. It's really just notes. I think you can put down notes in the way, for example, like a guitar, you can put down notes with a piano of what a guitar would do for like, for example, like a solo. Replace the instrument with the piano instrument with a guitar sound, and it'll just sound like a guitar. Like, especially with chords and strums, strum notes, you can absolutely replicate those kind of noises. And also there's something called there's a bunch of VSTs and a bunch of sound font VSTs that can replicate a lot of instruments. It's going to sound a little video gamey, but if that's what you're going for, I think that's perfect. There's a lot of old games like on the SNES and the Game Boy that did kind of do all the things that you're talking about with really low quality sound. So it's really down to like how well you can create uh the note pattern versus what it actually sounds like as
yeah.
as an instrument. So, yeah.
There are cases where, you know, again, like we mentioned earlier, there are cases when there is a sound we know that we want where we do think that it's better to go to somebody outside, you know, somebody
Yes, that
who
too.
understand. Yeah. And that's really what it is it's like because Homestuck has this video gamey sound, in most cases we can sort of get away with the you know, the DAW sort of slightly more digital sound because it works for the genre that Homestuck is. But when there are times when we want a deeper understanding of a certain type of music, we'll go to an outside person who we know makes incredible music that way.
Yeah. So if you're making a song and you realize, I don't think I can execute this right, you can always reach out to someone, commission them for a stem, commission them for like a single dot wav of like this specific line you're going for, and then just insert it.
All right. Next question. Also, we are kind of at the end of the official time, but most of the team is able to keep going a little bit longer. So, we will still be taking some questions. So from Lux, I know Homestuck has a lot of world building complexity. How do you go about managing this and maintaining informational consistency?
That's a writer question.
Sorry, repeat one more time.
Uh, I know Homestuck has a lot of world building complexity. How do you go about managing this and maintaining informational consistency?
It is so hard.
We
It
do
is,
our
I
best.
shouldn't say hard, but it is a lot of work.
It's a
Having
lot
three
of
writers is amazing for that, actually.
it's a lot of checking on each other, a lot of back checking, a
Yeah,
lot of rereading Homestuck and the epilogues and HS2 and Hive Swap and all sorts of things to keep track of.
yeah. I
And
mean,
the
the
MSPA
advantage,
wiki. The
yeah.
MSPA wiki is
God
also a
bless
really
the
big fan
I
MSPA.
won't
resource
even,
we
I won't
have.
deny, I won't deny going to the wiki sometimes when I'm like, wait, I could have sworn XYZ. I mean, it's nice because the writers and the artists, for that matter, who are another layer of double checking on us, which again, forming a cohesive communication network in your project is so important. But like, uh, it is a lot to keep track of, and having, I mean, a little peek behind the curtain, because our own internal stuff even changes from time to time and gets rewritten. So not only tracking all of the consistency that we want to do with notoriously complex and multifaceted Homestuck proper, but our own internal beyond canon lore and rules, these change as we write. And the only way to account for that is the honest answer of, you have to really care about whatever it is that you have to memorize. So with Homestuck, we all really care about Homestuck. With our own project, we really care about that. And you have to be reading and thinking, and you just have to check your own work, essentially, is the best advice I can even think to give for that.
All right. Next question. How do you go about advertising your work?
I guess there are a lot of ways you could do it. Obviously, there's like social media. Um, if you wanted to, like more classically, you could be going to conventions and whatnot, trying to advertise your work as well, setting up tables and like trying to like hand it like sort of like sample it out for people, you know what I mean? I know getting your work out there is probably arguably one of the hardest parts about it. But I
Mm.
think probably one of the best ways to go about it is literally just talking about it, you know? Like I've seen a lot of like indie productions before where it's like they just had like a like their own like studio a Twitter, or maybe just even their own personal account, and they're just like, I'm working on a thing, and then they're just like they kept posting about it, they kept talking about it, and it's like the more they kept posting about it, people were like, hey, I've just been seeing this around a lot. Like, what is this? It's like, the increased curiosity and whatnot. It's like, I think if you just talk about it, well, getting it out there, letting it be known, word will get around, you know? And
Yeah.
like, I will say though, it's like you can't immediately expect that it's like first post, it's gonna like blow up kind of thing like that. It's like it really is like it really takes patience,
Yeah.
of course.
I think it's important to remember that Homestuck, as its popularity was realized, really was just through straight word of mouth. Um, it was, I think that when it exploded and people started, asking that big question of what's Homestuck, a lot of that was from people who just were fans of it, who heard about it from their friends, and then posted about it, and then just kept propagating out people who started getting interested in it. And Honestly, I think that's probably like the organic growth through word of mouth is probably one of the most valuable tools that anybody has as a great equalizer of being able to make people aware of what you're making.
Mhm.
Yeah. I also want to do kind of an acknowledgement here of the fact that we, as a particular production, have been incredibly lucky to benefit from the built-in audience that Andrew established with Homestuck. Um,
Yeah, going from a existing
Yeah.
IP, of course.
So like a
Yeah.
derivative work like this definitely has that as an advantage.
yeah. So I mean that's a thing, you know, sometimes if you can get a gig writing on something that's not your original idea first, you can make it kind of yours in a way by writing on it. I mean, there's degrees to that, of course,
Mhm.
but we have been just tremendously lucky. Although I like, you know, I do think we have done a good job of kind of cultivating our own audience.
Yeah.
I don't know, it feels dirty to say that, but I
Why?
hope I hope you know what I mean. Like, you know,
I know
I'm
what you
I'm
mean.
I'm
There are
proud of our
people.
production and the distinct audience it has compared to, original Homestuck.
Well, we're bringing something new. So it comes with the
Something
territory.
beyond.
All right. How far ahead do you usually plan out your story at a time? Like, how many months in advance do you have planned and whatnot? And is there a
Ideally,
specific order with writing or art?
writing usually does come first, and ideally, I outlines should be like not even just like outlines for like the script, but like the whole like everything of the story should ideally be done like not even like done, but like the big beats should have been plotted out like early on the production when it first started. Because obviously, as you're writing the story, you want to know what your end goal is, you know? You don't want to just like write and be like, so where's the story going? And everyone's like, I don't know. So obviously it's like those beats all have to be are like the first established things that you make way in the beginning.
Yeah. It'll change though. Like it will inevitably change.
Obviously
Um,
like things can like tweak here and there, but you know what the end goal is inevitably.
yeah. And whether that's an end goal as like a fully scripted giant script document or a very loose outline and ideas that are vibes sticking in your head. I don't recommend that last part, by the way. Please write as much down as you can every single time you have a thought that you want to be meaningfully included.
We are
But
always
it
screaming at each other to write things down when we think of something.
yeah.
Write that down, write that down.
No, that's I mean it is so essential because with a production this big, and again, I keep saying that and it feels silly, but Homestuck just has so many moving parts, and Beyond Canon is pretty similar. Um, and if you don't keep planning, keep editing, keep going back to your outline, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. But yeah, the writing 98% of the time comes first.
hmm
I think there have been a few times when something really cool got drawn and we were all like, "Oh, let's put that in."
Let's
But
lead to that one.
but usually some kind of concept work has come before that to inspire the drawing. So it's,
hmm
it's rare.
hmm
All right, and then another one. Right before the publishing of a new update, is the page shared and given feedback by everyone involved, or does only the director slash manager give the green light?
Everyone,
We
you
all
know.
come together on update day.
Also because we're all really
Yep.
excited to look at the update.
Yeah, exactly. We're always like lurking in the server
Hmm.
and on Twitter and basically everywhere.
Yeah.
We
We
just want to
mentioned as
see.
much we
And
mentioned as
also,
much earlier in the presentation about how it can be one of the most like rewarding and motivating parts of the process of, actually publishing something or completing something. And this is really just helps with that part of it as well.
like when an update's going up, Koei will post a preview and we'll all go over it and check for anything we're missing. You know, any typos, any art inconsistencies.
It's always just before it goes up. Do you notice everything that needs to be fixed?
Yeah.
All right. Right. How does your choice in web host affect the sort of flashes and what sorts of animations you can make?
So I don't think that our choice in host is really going to impact the like the capabilities of what we can publish in terms of animations. Obviously, you'll want to choose a host that can serve those kind of files. For the case of Homestuck in particular, a lot of the animations that were done during OG Homestuck, and we've done a little bit in our cases as well, they're utilizing a Shockwave Flash, which at this point is considered an officially deprecated um, technology for browsers, even though there are some tools out there like Ruffle that really do help with kind of bridging that gap between legacy versus more modern website capabilities. So if you are choosing a host, that might be something that you want to keep in mind if they're able to even serve the kind of files in the first place you're wanting to have as part of your dynamic updates.
All right. And kind of bouncing off that is, how do y'all do y'all have any intentions for more experimentation with like the web page and what you can do with it? And kind of how that connects to it being, I guess, kind of a Homestuck style webcomic.
Oh, we definitely
Yes.
want to get experimental. We
Mhm.
like dabbled a
Yeah.
little bit
There's
here
a
and
lot
there,
of
Yeah.
but we
strange
do want to
things
get
Yeah.
crazier.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
something of an ideas guy about these things.
Yeah. I think the specifics are probably getting into spoiler territory
Yeah.
possibly, so we
Yeah.
can't really say too
Yeah,
much,
Mm.
we're
but
not
you
gonna
know.
tell you,
I,
but
I
we're
very often run up and say, Kohi, is this possible?
Kohi, how can
They
we break
almost
the
always say
website?
yes.
yeah. I
Yeah,
feel like
like I
it's
said, I love
always been
saying yes.
yes.
I think what's
It's my
really
favorite
nice
thing.
is that like Koei always tells us about the website is that like you can customize the website in almost any way, right?
For the most part, yeah. Since we are using a CMS, it can be restrictive in what you can do in the CMS, but if you do have the technical capabilities, you can augment your CMS platform of choice. You can add in, custom support for whatever it is you're trying to do. So it really is, sky's the limit on
Ooh.
on what you can do there. And you know, I love being able to bring ideas to work. Like whenever there's something new that's brought up in our team chat of like, hey, we want to do this, or hey, let's do that. I'm frothing at the mouth, figuring out ways of like how can I make this a reality? How can I make it so that this is supported on the website? Um, but yeah,
We have all of the power.
Do you have any tips for compensating for issues like ADHD and executive dysfunction when trying to get a project off the ground?
Hmm.
Or ways otherwise to help you stay focused and motivated?
This
I
can
think
always
that's the.
be
Sorry,
a
go for it,
tricky
Kim.
one. It is a tricky one though, because like I also have ADHD myself, and sometimes it is really hard
Mhm.
to work around
Yeah.
it. For me personally, I like to keep a to-do list for myself because to-do lists really help with me a lot. I also have I forgot what it's called, but it's like a time tracker. It's by I think it's by Lemon Demon, actually. Um,
Really?
yeah, they made this like app a long time ago where it's like it connects to whatever like if you assign the window to this like app, say for example my Clip Studio Paint, it'll track how long I have been working on this window, and if I close out of it, it like stops. And it tells me to keep working, kind of thing like that. And essentially, for me personally, it like guilts me a little bit. But like, you need to get back to work. You've only worked like 2 minutes on this. I'm like, fuck, you're right. So I go back. So it makes me go back to want to work on it. And at least like because I do also it also helps me set like a limit for myself as well. Because I do try to keep my hours each day like at least a minimum of like a part-time job of like every day of how much time I put into my work. So every time I work on like we get the panels, for example, I'll be like, oh, okay, I have spent like so and so hours today working this. I think I did like, a full day's worth of work. I'm going to stop here for now. So at least this also helps me track like how long I've been working as well.
Mine isn't so healthy, but it's coffee and Adderall.
Oh my goodness.
Shaking your hand. I am shaking
Yeah.
your hand.
That's literally the only way. But calendars do help, and assigning deadlines to yourself also help. Because I need to feel like I have to. I deadlines do give me relief because if I don't have a deadline, nothing will happen and time will keep moving and I'll lose track of what day it is. So it's definitely helpful to have a calendar.
Mm.
Oh, I think another good thing to bring up, unfortunately Chumi had to leave early, but a production manager is like
Yes.
also like
Yes.
your lifesaver. Like, okay,
Mm.
I don't know how the rest of you guys feel, but like knowing that there's someone going to come up to me later and be like, "So how's it going? How's it looking?" I'll be like, I'll have something ready for you soon. Kind of thing like that.
Yeah,
It's like
like
I don't know how else to put it, but sometimes you need to be like a little scared that someone is depending on you. You
it's
know what I
okay.
mean?
Mm.
Yeah, like be open to being nudged. Like it's for your own good. It's like it's for your own good. Just trust me.
Mm. I'll also want to make a point on this too. In my personal way of coping with it, I am involved in a lot of different components and a lot of different parts with both Furthest Ring and also with Homestuck. So a lot of times if I don't feel like working on a specific section that isn't like, super high priority due date or anything, I can procrastinate by working on something else. So it's not actually procrastinating if you're, continuously doing work, right? It's just you're changing your mindset of working on part A to working on part B. And of course, that's gonna, depend on the, stuff that you have to work on. If it is high priority, you should focus in on that and, use your mechanisms to be able to um, keep on working on that. But for general day to day, that's kind of my personal way of managing tasks is having many different plates that are spinning and choosing which one to focus on. So I'm not actually ever hitting that paralysis point.
Yeah. I think another thing to do for for one's own sake is I've found that breaking a task into like clearly delineated incremental deliverables will help you feel more well. If you're looking at a task as just the task, then all the work you do on it doesn't feel like you accomplished anything until you get to check that final box. But if you've broken it down into its constituent steps, and every time you really accomplish something you feel that sense of accomplishment, it does
Mm,
create a sort of internal mental momentum in terms of like
mm,
getting a thing done. But another thing that was mentioned uh was motivation. And I honestly think that for times when you are feeling whether, ADHD'd out or life is in your way or, whatever's happening, I think that being able to cultivate a strong base of motivation in whatever way you can is sort of the secret chemical X of getting this done. Like,
Yeah,
mm,
I can I follow up on this in the sense that like this
yeah.
is actually where like team morale is actually really great as like motivation because it's like
Hmm.
when you get to talk with your whole team about it, when everyone's excited about it, it's like it makes you more excited to work on it. Like everyone's hype, everyone's like, "Oh my God, like I can see this coming to life," where it's like this idea is so genius that it's like it makes you really want to put the pen to paper. It's like, guys, I want to bring this to life right now. And like similarly, it's what helps with also focus as well as we I like to call it lab hours. Essentially, it's just us hanging out in like voice chat on Discord as we're working, essentially. But it's essentially the similar vein. It's like, when say for example, it's like when you do homework, you go to like the library to help you like focus and do your homework. It's like putting yourself in a scenario where it's like, okay, it is time to work now. Because that helps me a lot too, where like essentially I assign in my brain, it's like it is work time, like right now. Especially when I'm working with my team members, it's like I don't know how for some of you ADHD havers feel it, but it's like a sometimes when I work, I need more stimulation. And that's why when I do these lab hours and I'm hanging out with my other coworkers, it's like, it's like hands off. We're all talking and hanging out. I'm getting like, my stimulation of hanging out with my friends, but also I'm working on the project at the same time.
the
So I
parallel
really
play.
exactly. Um, that's why I really think that like a team morale and like actively working with your team members really helps focus as well.
And I think that kind of actually blends into another question. How do you pitch slash communicate slash discuss ideas together with everyone at once?
Hmm.
Meetings.
Yes.
It's meetings. You gotta have a lot of meetings. Sorry, Kim, it sounded like you had something to.
Oh, I was just thinking because like meetings is definitely like I see it's probably like more of the formal ones where it's like we have gathered everyone here now to talk about the ideas and like to hash it out and whatnot. Um, I also liked the when we or some like looser times where it's just like we just like pitched an idea in like our work chat. It's like, guys, how do we feel about this? You know what I mean? And all of a sudden we're just like, oh, that's interesting. And we're just like, we have very specifically have like a brainstorming in the writing part of our work chat where it's like it's not exactly like ideas we're like super secure on right now, but it's just more like we just want to put an idea out there and it's like we all like, just think about it together, you know? Um, text is at least a good way to like, just spitball out some ideas and put it down into like put it down in like writing. But I do think the meetings really do help to like live and actively like hash it out.
All right. And then this is a combination of a couple questions, but how do you, I guess, what stuff do you do to take care of your physical health and mobility, while working so hard in the comic? And how do you not destroy your posture?
Oh God. So, yeah, around like 2024, my wrist blew up, especially during the production. It was really, really difficult to like um maintain my physical health and the comic. And it wasn't just my wrists, it was also my shoulders and it was also my back. So ergonomics is really, really important, especially if you're working for a long time. Keep stretching your arms, keep stretching your wrists. Um, you don't want to wear wrist braces for 2 months straight. It's not fun. It's not fun. You can't draw, you can't do anything. Um, Definitely. This is also why in chat I recommended a standing desk. I know it costs money, but if you're someone that has to work daily, that really, really helps with keeping your muscles moving and also keeping your physical health good because sedentary lifestyles, they're not sustainable for the human body. You have to move. And by moving a lot and walking a lot, it does help with your posture and making sure you're sitting up. Like for my chair, I have a pillow that's forcing my back to sit up, so I'm not shrimp posing. Um, Vertical mouses also really help. I had to switch to vertical mouses completely because I can't do the standard one. It just like ruined my wrist. Um, Also putting like a jelly, what do you call it? There's like a jelly thing for the mouse pad that is on the
Wrist
bottom of the
rest?
mouse pad that keeps your wrist straight. That also helps. Um, Trying to think of what else. Just
A really
ergonomics
nice
in
chair,
general.
if anything.
What was that?
A really nice chair, if
A
anything.
really nice chair does help. I had to invest in one.
It goes a long way.
It does go a long way. So yeah, I think because all your body's connected to your wrists, to your shoulders, to your back. It's
Mm,
important to start from the wrists and then everything else will come after because part of your back hurting is the way your shoulders positioned and it's stuff like that. I have fibromyalgia, so it's really, really hard to manage all these things at the same time. So if you ever feel like this stuff, like these problems are escalating, definitely see a rheumatologist or else you will never be able to work
mhm,
normally for a long time. Like you need to like see medical treatment. So don't ever let it get to that level
mm.
and just take care of your body.
The setup is for the long term. And this is an artist specific one, but very specifically, I like using I think what's really nice is using very large screen tablets. I know it's expensive, but it is like it will help you in the long run because when you use the smaller tablets that don't have the screen, it's meanwhile they're cheap, they do get the job done. You're doing a lot of like wrist motions, like
Mm-hmm.
really small repetitive wrist motions, and that can like really kill your wrist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think the screen tablets are really nice, and then the bigger you can get it. I have a 24-inch Cintiq right now, and I think that gets the job done for me like perfectly. It's nicer, and I also have it like propped up, so the screen is like essentially like sorry, vertical to me. So it's essentially like, if I was like standing and painting on a canvas, I can use my whole arm to draw, so I'm not making like these tiny like little wrist motions that will kill my wrist.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Use your elbows more, like move your elbows more when you're
especially
making strokes.
exactly. And if you get those big screen tablets as well, like I really do recommend that you prop up your screen tablet or get like an arm for it because I know some people who have screen tablets and they like lay it flat on like the table. But of course, if you have that, you're gonna be like, shrimping over your
Yeah,
desk to look down on your screen tablet. It's like,
a 90-degree angle.
oh God. So that I don't know how obvious that is to some people, but I just want to put it out there, like, please, like, I think like a good tablet setup will be so essential to like saving your body.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, let's see. How about in terms of production pipeline, uh, where does teams where do teams sometimes tend to bottleneck the most? And is there a method used to fix the holdup?
Hmm. I think most of the time where it bottlenecks is just when we decide to do something really ambitious.
Yeah.
Uh, like say for example,
Yeah.
there's like a page where it's like, can we like animate this like crazy style? But like the only reason it's like it bottlenecks is because we didn't initially plan for it to get kind of big. But it,
Yeah.
it it's like that thing we were talking about earlier. It's like we start off small, but then it's like we're all always so tempted to like do something a little extra, you know? And that's like where it
Hmm.
happens. Where it's like, okay, guys, I'm gonna go a little extra here. But see, the downside here about being a little extra, it's like, all right, so you're taking your time like animating this one little shot, and everyone, and it's like something unexpected during production. It's like now we're waiting on you a little bit. It's like, okay, guys, but I'll finish it. I'll finish it soon. I swear. So that's always something to look out for. It's like as much as it's cool to do something crazy, you can see what I mean, where it's like it starts halting things a little bit because we're all waiting on like this one thing, you know?
And let's do maybe one or two more questions, since we're about at the hour.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. How did you come up with the art style for Homestuck Beyond Canon? What remains consistent between artists and what is up for the artist to decide style-wise? Also, what made you change from one artist for each update to all the artists on most updates?
Ooh,
Hmm.
we got someone who's been keeping track.
I think what's nice about our current team is like of course since we've been fans for like since we were like literally like teenagers, we have like Homestuck like embedded in our brains.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the artists like our styles are just kind of inherently influenced by Homestuck, and we kind of got like a really strong visual idea of what makes Homestuck look like Homestuck. But also when we were first starting off like production, what I really liked is that like when we started shifting more into what I like to call like Guardian style, instead of the usual like Homestuck like noodly arm kind of style, is that I actually tried to reference a lot of like Andrew Hussy's like sketches, like his pencil sketches and some of his older work. Because I really like the line work in it one, but also like the proportions and whatnot. And it's like um because if anything, it's like even though there is a lot of artists on it, it's like as an art style, it all does come from one person. It's very interesting to try and style match that as well. But of course, like we don't try to be too beholden to it because like I was talking about earlier in this panel, like I really do think Homestuck is like an evolving like production, especially with the art. And like I just think to myself, I like to think Homestuck is more illustrative sometimes, where it's just like as long as this panel conveys what we need, and like I think that's just like the goal of it. You know, I don't know if that's too helpful or not, but essentially it's just like when we make the panels, like we just want to make sure it looks good, you know?
Pretty much.
All right, I think this will be our last question. Are there any major influences each of you have personally, uh, while on this topic, either creatively or how you choose to run a large-scale production like Beyond Canon?
Hmm. on how to run it or like the writing
I think
and
on
art?
how to run it, like what's influenced you in terms of like organization, um, or just like process, I guess, or also
Hmm.
creatively.
I guess like production wise, I think for me it's just I've been on like several productions before. I've done stuff in like large industry studios before, so I understand the
Ah.
legwork around there, but also I have done several indie productions as well, making like um collaborative group films with people before. I was an art director on indie films before as well. So I understand all I've been through this rodeo before, you know what I mean? It's why I'm so like when this project first started, I really wanted to make sure that it came to fruition, you know what I mean? That's why immediately as you started, like I wanted to put together like all the spreadsheets and everything. It's like, guys, we are gonna do it, we're gonna make it, and this is how we do it.
Right.
So
And
I
it
guess
also,
it's just good to have someone who has experience in it. Sorry.
Yeah.
oh no, I was just gonna say, it also applied to influences in art. The
Hmm.
question asker clarified.
I guess it can vary from artist to artist. A lot of us are influenced by a lot of things.
So loaded, but
Yeah. I feel
Andrew.
like
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
true.
I think that's an obvious one, maybe.
Yeah.
We like Andrew's work.
Big fans. I
Every
think
time,
we all
like,
have
There's
like
just so
pretty
much.
diverse interests
yeah,
as
Yeah.
well.
every
Yeah.
time
We're
someone
always telling
approaches
each
me
other.
with the question of like, who's your inspirations? I'm like, oh my God, I don't know everything.
It is
Everything I've ever read, everything I've
I
ever
think it's
yeah,
watched.
it's hard
it's
to distill.
it's interesting because the format style of Homestuck is so unique and like one of the first of its kind that got really big like this. So
Mhm.
to imagine an influence is like, well, Homestuck was the influence because it's so
Uh,
unique in its way.
Hmm.
Of course, there's like a lot of other webcomics around that time that were inspiring. So it's just a lot. There's just so much. I guess
Yeah.
being our ages and growing up throughout that time, we had a unique internet experience as well. So we were also influenced by, I guess, like just the general culture of that time period online.
That's a pretty amazing answer, actually. And
yeah,
Yeah.
I would absolutely second that, Andy. Like, I
our
think that's
millennial
kind of a,
childhood.
yeah, honestly.
I feel like that influence is kind of a necessity to work on Homestuck.
Yeah. Well, because Homestuck is so about what being a kid online is like, at least
Mhm.
as part of the general allegory. I'm also inspired a lot personally by music, actually. Which I
Oh
know is
yeah,
like
absolutely.
it's a weird
Mhm.
translation to a more narrative experience, but music is a really big inspiration for me creatively. Even, I mean, and I mean about like narratively, not,
Hmm.
um, I listen to a lot of dance music and like a lot of drum and bass, dubstep, a lot of hard style. I listen to a lot of hip hop, a lot of metal, and I think a lot of even just mood and tone as well as actual narrative is pulled from that kind of thing. I know it's weird to describe exactly how it translates. I couldn't do it if I tried, but
Think it's
there's
too odd.
absolutely an influence on
Also,
our narrative processes.
Absolutely.
and I
I
don't
was
think it's too
also
out of the ballpark either, because like, music is really important to Homestuck as well.
It
It's in,
is. And I was even going to mention during that early period of Homestuck was inspired by old games, old RPGs.
Mhm.
Um, so I do want to mention lately we've been really inspired by old RPG Maker games, such as like Yumeniki. That's one thing I can say is like in our
Mm,
Mm.
creative collage of just general things we're inspired by. In the same way that Homestuck was inspired by Earthbound, if that makes any sense. So
Even down to the
of
name, like the name Homestuck, if I remember correctly, was derived from being like analogous to Earthbound.
Alternia
Mhm.
bound as well. Forget.
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
as the next like group of people working on Homestuck, we also have like similar things that we're taking from like yeah, it's all connected. Everything is connected, to be honest.
Yeah. Also, weirdly, I guess this is just me, and I don't know how true it is for other people, but I'm hugely influenced by the FromSoft catalog. I know that
Mm.
feels weird in the content of Homestuck, but as long as we're just talking general creative influences, that's been a huge effect. Um, I know a lot of us are huge fans of Umineko, which is another thing that I think is really appropriate to bring up.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I was
Well,
actually
considering
gonna.
Homestuck is like such a meta.
Mhm.
It's tough to answer this. I give up.
There's a lot of
I mean,
like
it's just a general like there's so much of a melting pot of just life experiences and like media that we've experienced in our own lives that it is kind of hard to distill like what part of what that process is inspired by or directly influenced by something that you read 20 years ago,
Yeah.
especially when it's become such a part of your like something that's become integral to your identity, and you realize, oh, I picked up this behaviorism or this trait because of XYZ. It's so it can be kind of hard, you because you've taken that and kind of made it part of your own workflow and your own identity and how you make things yourself, and it's really just like the transformative nature of art. I would say just constantly building on one another and referencing things that you've experienced.
Be a little corny to say that I'm also inspired by my friends.
true.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like it's like what do you call it? It loops around between everybody where I'm like the writers inspired me to write better. The artists inspired me to do art better, like to explore more. I think having your friends around you who are also creative will lend you the ability to evolve your own work as well.
Positive feedback loop.
Exactly, that's the word.
All right. And what a wonderful note to end it on, how important and motivating friendship is.
Yay!
And that's so wonderful because everyone's got friends and everyone's capable of making friends that can inspire you and you can inspire your friends as well to make excellent work. Great. That's pretty much it. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, panelists, the wonderful FRS team. And thank you everyone for coming to um the Nibbin Ink Fest. I'm gonna drop in the chat real quick the cartoonist co-op links as well as the link to the Oops All Comics scene that we have available. And make sure to check out all the events. And of course, make sure to check out Homestuck Beyond Canon. Um, any last words from the team?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
reading.
guys.
Yeah. Thank you guys
Yeah.
for coming, reading. If you're a Patreon supporter, thank you for that. And please make the art that you want to make, or even just start trying.
It's
Just
always
pull the
worth it.
Hopefully,
trigger.
It's
this.
always worth it.
Be the change you want to see in the world.
Yes. And hopefully, something from this workshop, like, helped piece something together to help you bring that vision to life.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I'll end it here. Everyone have a good rest of your day and make sure to check out the other panels. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye. Thank
everyone.
you.
Take
Goodbye.
care,
Well,
everybody.